Gentlemen, let me introduce you to the www.bit.ly/timer20. This is the 10 amp system. You can buy this off of Amazon, you can buy this off of eBay. I'm sure this dude's sold 1 million of these units and they promptly got thrown in the F-it bucket because the people that he sold them to could not understand his non-clear instructions on how to set this thing up. We're going to cover some of the things that I've figured out with this timer. I am using this in a time-off timer configuration because it is sold as a time-off timer. Well, it is, but the instructions do not cover this. Now, the guy that created this thing and gives the instructions on YouTube is an engineer, speaks like an engineer, thinks like an engineer, and I'm sure it makes perfect sense to him and everybody else that is engineer fluent. Okay. To us high functioning retards that are just trying to simply make it so our fan stays on after we flip off a switch, your instructions are the worst, shittiest written things I've ever written in my life. They leave a lot of things to be explained and they don't make any flipping sense. When really it's the simplest thing in the world to get set up now that I understand how to use this timer. Nowhere in your instructions does it say that the green wire can be used as a switch hot as your sense wire. All they talk about is the blue wire as your trigger for the timer. How the timer works is that you're going to give it a ground and your positive current. It's from 0 to 24 volts, I do believe. Your load is going to come out on your yellow wire. So the ground wires float, they're tied together. This is the ground lead for the timer. This is the ground lead for the fan. In this application, we're going to use a 120 millimeter fan. The voltmeter is here to show us that we have power coming out. Okay, now you can go and you can jump down the rabbit hole of trying to program this thing with switches and get lost, or you can spend $1 more and get the one that's got a Wi-Fi encoder in it. So how we get into the Wi-Fi programming of this thing is simple. Not simple. If you try to follow the instructions that are provided, either it be through the YouTube video, and the only place I was actually able to find the right web address to get into this was on the paperwork. But only on the outdated form of the paperwork. On the new updated form of the paperwork, they link a YouTube video and the guy gives the wrong web address. So if you're trying to follow his instructions on the YouTube video, forget it. You're never going to get logged into it. The address that he gives is 192.162.4.1. The actual right web address, because he's not willing to fact check his own shit, is 192.168.4.1. Okay? I'll cover that here in a minute. Anyhow, how we actually get into this thing, out. This orange wire we're going to completely abandon. We're not going to do anything with it. The blue wire, we're not going to do anything with it either. This doesn't do shit. This blue wire doesn't do shit unless you're doing a time-off pulse mode, or if you're wanting this to run an LED modulator system. So forget this. As a time-on timer, time-off timer, this is not your trigger wire, it's your green wire. We've got this configured in 12 volt high. So the trigger is going to be activated with 12 volts being applied to the green wire. Positive, 12 volt positive. Okay, so to activate the Wi-Fi mode, which you guys are going to have to know how to do, we're going to take the white wire and tie it to the ground. Then we're going to simply attach 12 volts to the timer, and the blue light's going to start blinking. Once you've got your Wi-Fi enabled on the timer, you're going to come over and you're going to connect to timeshop.wifi 521, okay? Once you're connected to that, you're going to come over here to the search window. Actually, up here at the bar is where you want to type this in. And what you're going to type in is 192.168.4.1. Oh, pardon me. .1. Enter. And that's going to bring us to our programmer window. It's just like going into your Wi-Fi router. So from here, you got your timer configuration, which is the window we're going to go into. Firmware update, do not touch this. Power on. And power off. Now what just happened is the fan turned on, turned off, and we did that via Wi-Fi, okay? But what we're gonna do is go into timer configuration. To use this in the time off timer configuration, we're gonna go to mode 12, so function 12. You're gonna set your timer on, first time 1, that's all you're gonna worry about is T1. You're gonna set this at 5. T2, we're gonna set this at 5. We're gonna set our analog trigger. We're going to set this not digital, but analog. We're going to set it to 2, and then you're going to set your low voltage at 0 and your high voltage at 10. So anything over 10 volts, it will trigger this thing and say, okay, it's time for you to do your job, and it'll start counting down. Now, this here is a positive output, or we can switch it for a negative output. So either we can switch on hot or we can switch on ground. That's set up from this window. And do we want it to ramp in gradual, or do we want it full on? So we want it full on so we don't have that box clicked, and we don't want to have it reversed in function. Nowhere in the instructions is it showing this to us. Now for the sake of demonstration purposes, we're going to set this up for 10 seconds. So we'll zero out our timer 1 and timer 2 so they're not in conflict with each other, causing the unit just to turn on and stay running, which took forever for me to figure that out as well, because nowhere in the instructions is that stated. Okay, so made some changes. Now we're going to tell it to save, and it is now written to the timer. Let's go over here and let's go play. We have our positive 12 volt lead attached. Everything's just exactly the way it was. What we're going to do now is we're going to disconnect our white wire, and we're going to pull off the red wire. We're going to count for a couple seconds and let the little capacitor in here discharge. Please note the blue Wi-Fi indicator light is off. The timer is now on and active. Okay? Once we lift the 12 volt off this green wire, fan turns on. Once we reapply the 12 volt to the trigger wire, fan turns off. So for all of you guys that are out there trying to struggle through the most painfully written, shittily described instructions on the face of this earth, for this thing, now, this is a relatively cheap timer versus, let's say, I don't know, an Omron or something like this. Some of these are 50 to 100 bucks. This is a time off timer that goes to 60 seconds an interval. Okay, if you were to buy this thing brand new, this is a much cheaper possible applicable process for you. This thing does 25 different functions. It's primarily geared around running lights. Okay, very low amp rating, also very low amp rating, but idiot free. The hardest part is trying to figure out how to wire the socket, which is the same thing. Depending on your coil, you're gonna have 110 volts in it. Usually pulled to ground signal wire. So, fan on, 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1007, 1008, 1009, 1010. Off. All right, well, I'm gonna put this out there in the digital ether for everybody to consume, eat up, and enjoy. And if in some way this helps somebody, give me a thumbs up. My YouTube channel is most likely not going to apply to your brain bag of knowledge because I do antique radio equipment. So therefore, don't bother subscribing. Just use this information. Go over to this dude's webpage and tell him to write instructions that are in English that normal human beings can use. I'm BBI. I'll see you. Bye.